You're what's poppin', gang? Hope everybody here, hope y'all got it. This Smoker with Peso. Let's get into it. Alright, so y'all know I'm from St. Louis, gang. And off the flip, I'm gonna tell y'all right now that dude that did them Chicago documentaries got everybody locked up from 600 old block. Do not do this documentary. Do not keep doing this documentary on St. Louis, gang. We don't need that. Do not listen to what these other little dudes are saying. They just want fame. You gonna tear the city down like that, man. But y'all know what time it is, man. We gonna dive right into this thing. Y'all thought I was taking another hiatus or something? What? No. I had to regroup, bro. I had to regroup from that one video I watched. I ain't gonna lie. I kind of been thrown off since I watched that video with the kids. But I'll drop it on the thing at the end of the video so y'all can watch it if y'all want to. Watch it at your own discretion, gang. But we gonna dive right into this thing. We ain't wasting much more time. And let's get it. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, ring that bell. And let's get it. I said, let's get it like I got that video already. Ha ha ha.
When it comes to the most dangerous cities for rappers in America, the spotlight often falls on more well-known places like Chicago, a city that not only pioneered the drill music genre, but has also recorded the highest number of total homicides in the country for over a decade now. Chicago is far away from the top when it comes to cities with the highest per capita homicide rates. And in reality, there's a place so deadly that it makes Southside Chicago look like Disneyland. There's one city that's consistently ranked #1 for the past 10 years or more, and that city is St. Louis. So dangerous in fact that a few years ago it was the deadliest city in the entire world outside of the cartel-controlled war zones of Latin America. This has sparked ongoing debate online about just how dangerous life in this city really is. And a big reason for the problem is the readily available firearms that circulate as a result of Missouri's notorious...
Y'all know they finna change our gun laws? Well, change the gun laws in Missouri, because y'all know I don't live in Missouri no more, in St. Louis and shit. They finna change the gun laws in Missouri because of St. Louis, gang. Like I don't know if I feel good about that or if I don't, but my city be cracking.
Notoriously lax gun laws. Here in the state of Missouri, they have permitless carry laws, meaning that if you're 19 years or older, you don't need a permit to openly carry a gun. This means that in St. Louis, every block and hood has an army of gangsters openly brandishing military-grade firearms and ready to use them at a moment's notice. With an incredibly fragmented gang landscape made up of Blood, Crip, and GD gangs that have come from all over America, and the complicated gang ties, meaning...
Okay, so I can't really see. But like, y'all see that little yellow Velda City right there? That's where I'm from. I'm from right there. All right. So like, I'm gonna see what the yellow mean. But like, I hope they don't mean what I think it mean. But that's where I'm at. I'm in the middle of the city. We're in the middle of the city. And we can go either the north side, west side, south side, kind of far from it, right? But we can go either way. You know what I'm saying?
Dozens of tiny neighborhood cliques are always at war in a constant battle royale of overlapping and constantly shifting gang ties. Now, while St. Louis has been a fairly underrated city for hip-hop, they have produced some stars over the years. Mainstream rappers like Chingy, Nelly, and most recently Sexy Red have put STL on the map musically. But even
Chingy
for the
was
most
not one
polished
of them,
artists
gang.
to break into the industry, behind them are secret gang ties that many people couldn't have imagined. Chingy's uncle reportedly was responsible for bringing the 6'2" Brim Bloods to St. Louis in the 80s, giving him family ties to the deadly street gang. Sexy Red doesn't just wear red for fashion either. She hails from a hood in St. Louis associated with the 45 Retta Bloods. And even STL's most famous mainstream rapper Nelly, known for his romantic anthem Dilemma and smash hit Ride With Me, actually has long-running secret affiliations to the Rollin' 30s and 60 Crips in St. Louis. However, if Nelly was a rapper coming out of the gang-controlled hoods of St. Louis in this day and age, he might well have been murdered before he had a chance to make a hit song. Starting in Chicago, over the last few years, the drill music culture has taken hold of St. Louis too. Nowadays, every gang has a couple of rappers frontlining the beef publicly, making music all about life on their block, the enemies they've killed or plan to kill, and the high-speed chases with the cops trying to stop them catching another body. The streets have become a battle royale where the rappers roll around their neighborhoods, broadcasting their activities and inviting their ops to come and shoot it out with them, with numerous instances of rappers actually arranging shootouts and broadcasting the entire thing live on Instagram for the whole world to see. For some reason, despite the popularity of drill music, St. Louis has so far stayed in the shadows compared to the larger, more popular drill cities of the time,
because that's
like
not
Chicago,
how we get down.
New York, and
We
Philadelphia.
don't move like
but
that,
today,
gang.
that changes forever, because me and my team have spent the last month doing more research than anyone has ever done on the streets of St. Louis, and in this video I'll be revealing to the world for the first time the true hidden stories of the streets of St. Louis. We've spent hundreds of hours poring over some of the true hidden stories of the streets of St. Louis. We've spent hundreds of...
He's a goofy. Look, gang. Look, gang. If we gonna do this documentary, gang, make sure you got real people in it. Big boy in the front, goofy. Goofy. I'm calling out the goofies in this video. I'm telling y'all right now, this is not a diss. I'm not a rapper. I ain't on none of that, but I'm telling y'all right now who the goofies is in this video. If I see any goofies in this video, I'm gonna let y'all know he's a goofy and he's a lemon. Big boy right there with the black shirt, he's a goofy. I ain't gonna name drop, but you see this video, you know you a goofy.
Of hours poring over some of the darkest corners of the internet to bring you the craziest street stories to ever come out of this city. And this video will cover every single hidden horror to come out of the St. Louis drill scene, from diss songs that caused instant murders in retaliation, drill rappers turning hood vlogs into open invitations for their ops to come and slide on them, and loose cannon members shooting at random people with switches on their guns on IG Live.
Whoever in that great challenger, I see it again on my daddy, I'm hitting the button. You better move around as fast as possible, Brody.
But before we get into all of the modern day gang wars going on in the St. Louis drill scene, first, let's take a closer look at how St. Louis became one of the most violent cities in American history.
That started back in like, really like 20,
content warning.
Like 20,
this video is about a sensitive
15.
topic involving loss of life. We've removed any graphic content to comply with YouTube's guidelines.
Cause y'all gotta remember, gang, everything he gonna talk about before like now, you gotta remember, everybody that was active, gang, they was grown. These was grown men out there doing grown men stuff with other grown men. It wasn't kids doing it. Kids didn't start getting into it until we came around. My generation came around, and we was 15, 16. We went from fighting to stealing cars to banging cars to banging houses to now we slamming it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then go from there. But
guidelines. We aim to provide informative, factual journalism.
I'm here to call out the BS in this video, gang, because I seen a lot of Chicago people. I talked to a lot of Chicago people out here in Illinois, and they told me that the Chicago documentary was BS. So I'm here to call out all the BS.
On a tragic event in the public interest
what's
that
like
does not
if you're
dismiss
not
its
there.
seriousness.
You know what I'm saying? You ain't
all
never
clips are
been
used
there.
under
You
the
ain't
doctrine of fair use
you know
for
what I'm
news
saying?
reporting and analysis.
You're doing.
If you want to watch my
reading
videos
stuff.
uncut and extended, go to
Everything that you read not real,
patreon.com/TrapLawRoss, where you can get those for just $2. While the antics of Sexy Red let the world know that St. Louis was home to serious national street gangs like the Bloods, the streets of St. Louis have really been deadly for decades. The city had claimed the crown of America's murder capital all the way back in the 1980s, but particularly since about 2010, St. Louis has consistently ranked amongst the most dangerous cities in America when looking at the per capita violent crime rates, particularly homicides. And during the late 2010s, St. Louis would go on a streak, having the highest per capita homicide rate every single year, culminating in 2020 when the city's homicide rate was an insane 88.1 per 100,000 people, basically doubling the murder rate of Memphis, which is also known as one of the most dangerous cities in America too. And St. Louis would continue topping the leaderboards of the nation's most dangerous cities. The homicide...
Like right here, okay, y'all see this picture? This Goodfellow, this part of the Goodfellow, this is the city. But if you go right up this street, literally, we'll go right up the street, right past Goodfellow, keep going up a little bit, you're going to be in my neighborhood, which is the county. You know what I'm saying? So, like, that's why I said, like, my hood, we right there, right, we in the county, but we right there on the crevices of the city, like, so... Yeah.
Rate even ranking St. Louis as the deadliest city in the world outside of Latin America. The record-breaking killing had continued all the way to last year, 2024, when St. Louis would once again have the highest per capita homicide rate, over double that of Chicago, which had the most total homicides. But to truly understand how St. Louis became one of the most dangerous places in America, overrun by gangs and violence, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, because at one point in history, St. Louis was considered one of the greatest cities in the country, known in the 19th century as the Gateway to the West, where numerous explorers and pioneers since Lewis and Clark would begin their journey to settle the American West. This history of St. Louis is still commemorated with the city's most famous landmark, the Gateway Arch that dominates its skyline. Being the gateway, together with the city's strategic position at the confluence of the Mississippi and Missouri rivers, made St. Louis a key hub for trade, transport, and migration, which brought both the people and the money to the city. This ended up making St. Louis the fourth largest city in the country by the year 1900. However, the significant population boom also brought some questionable characters to the city, which which planted the scenes for the organized
I think
crime
we still top
takeover
10,
during the
though.
1920s, when Prohibition-era gangsters took over the illegal booze business and brought about one of the city's first ever gang wars. These would include Italian gangs who were predecessors to the St. Louis Mafia, such as the Green Ones and the Russo gang, led by a notorious gangster called Willie Russo, as well as some interestingly named Irish or mixed gangs like the Cuckoo Gang, Egan Rats, named after their leader Thomas Egan, and their main ops, the Hogan Gang, or Hogan's Jelly Rolls, named after their boss Edward Jelly Roll Hogan. Both Egan and Hogan being not just gangsters but also politicians, which says a lot about how things worked in the Prohibition era in St. Louis. One of the most known shooters of this era was the Green Ones' enforcer, Alphonse Palazzolo, whose boss was Vito Gianola, the city's most powerful mobster. In the late 1920s, tensions in St. Louis's underworld boiled over, igniting a brutal wave of violence as the Green Ones clashed with the Cuckoo Gang, a bloody feud that raged until a truce was reached in late 1926. But the peace was short-lived, and by August 1927, two prominent Italian mobsters, Tony Russo and Vincent Spicuzza, were gunned down in Chicago, the police suspecting that the killings may well have been the work of the Cuckoo Gang, reigniting fears of renewed conflict. But in reality, the two had been double-crossed by Palazzolo, who himself would be assassinated by 4 shooters already in the following month. But this get-back wasn't enough, and in December the ops would spin back again, catching Palazzolo's boss, Vito Gianola, lacking at the house of a possible love interest, with the local newspapers creating full-page breakdowns of the slaying, where the assailants had broken into the woman's house and sprayed almost 100 bullets with a submachine gun, hitting Gianola 37 times. As the Prohibition era came to an end in the 1930s, these gangs moved to other hustles like illegal gambling, union racketeering, and pushing drugs like heroin. And the various Italian gang factions eventually came together to form the St. Louis Mafia, which acted as the biggest criminal organization in the city until the 1980s, when a violent internal conflict.
I've been saying, now I can vouch for the St. Louis Mafia because, well, you know, I know about the St. Louis Mafia.
Within the mob, triggered by power struggles, shifting alliances, and the federal government's growing pressure on traditional organized crime ended their reign.
Giordano's death in 1980 marked the end of an era in St. Louis's underworld history.
August 29, 1980, St. Louis mob boss Anthony Giordano dies of cancer. He had long held the rival Leisure and Michaels crime families together, but that was all about to change.
I saw the car blow up and the hood flew open and just pieces and body went flying everywhere.
19 days after Giordano's death, gang warfare erupts on I-55 when his ally, James Michaels, is killed in a car bombing while behind the wheel.
The information we've been able to determine at this time is that Mr. Michaels was removed from the quote organization.
Law enforcement makes repeated pleas for peace.
You know, it's a misnomer to say they're fighting amongst themselves. When they're killing each other on the streets of your community, that not only reflects on them, it reflects on the whole community.
But as one faction disappeared, many smaller ones would appear, and the crack era brought an explosion of African-American street gangs who took over the St. Louis underworld. But of course, the formation of these African-American gangs in St. Louis began way before that. In the past, St. Louis was known as the most southern city in the north, which was actually a reference to the city's exceptionally racist laws and culture, despite its placement in a relatively progressive northern part of the United States. This was experienced by the city's early black residents firsthand during the infamous 1917 race riots caused by the combination of existing racial tensions and competition over labor in an industrialized urban center. During these riots, white mobs would kill and injure dozens of black people, while their neighborhoods were burned to the ground, causing damages that would be in the millions of dollars in today's currency. But there was perhaps segregation could affect it in St. Louis today. In the southern parts of St. Louis, while black residents settled down in the northern neighborhoods, and the clear line between these two communities is the Del Mar Boulevard. But unfortunately for St. Louis's black population, simply segregating them into their own communities wasn't enough. And next, during the 1950s...
So real quick, since we talking about Delmore, I'm telling y'all something about Delmore. If you ever been to St. Louis and you go to you find yourself around Delmore, driving down Delmore, I want you to do me a favor when you get to the houses, right? I want you to look on, I'm gonna say this right into the mic. I want you to look to the right, I want you to look to the left, right? When you look to the left, there's gonna be big houses, gated communities, nice looking stores. You're gonna probably see a police on probably like 3 out of the 4 blocks just sitting there posting on the corners. You know what I'm saying? Getting ready to ride, do their rounds through the neighborhoods. And then you look to the right, right? Now when you look to the right, it don't even look like you ever look to the left. Don't look to the left though, no more. Just look to the right. And you're gonna see a whole different Delmore. It's just crazy. It's called the Delmore Divide. It's a real thing. And it just is just one of the things that shows you like how bad, how twisted St. Louis really is.
The city would come after their existing neighborhoods,
you know
forcing about 20,000 black residents and 800 businesses of a neighborhood known as Mill Creek Valley to relocate in the name of urban renewal, as the entire neighborhood was demolished to make way for infrastructure like Interstate 64 and the expansion of St. Louis University. But of course, the city had a plan for the displaced black working class residents, as they had just built a new, enormous, state-of-the-art public housing project in North St. Louis, known as the Wendell O. Pruitt Homes and William Igoe Apartments, altogether simply as Pruitt-Igoe. Designed by architect Minoru Yamasaki, these projects consisted of 33 11-story buildings which were hailed for replacing the so-called slums on the north side and bringing bright new additions to the city's skyline. But just like everywhere else in America, this colossal experimental project would quickly turn sour, as the buildings were since the beginning stripped of funding and maintenance, while the poor North St. Louis residents became even more isolated from the rest of society as they had been before. And in just a few decades, Pruitt-Igoe would descend into complete chaos, as the crumbling projects were taken over by gangs, crime, and decay. And
like, y'all know how they say Cabrini Greens was? That's how the Pruitt-Igoe was. Like, it was just like, it was like that. Like, it was cracking, like snipers on the roofs and the windows. It was really like that. Like, if you're not from there, don't know nobody there, you shouldn't be there.
These projects became perhaps the biggest blunder in the history of public housing in America, as several YouTube channels have actually covered this development in depth.
Unfortunately, a lack of funding from investors or the city forced Yamasaki to revise the design for cost cutting. Basically, he was forced to double the density of the buildings and cancel plans for playgrounds, parks, laundromats, grocers, and even public toilets.
The first warning sign was financial. The maintenance of Pruitt-Igoe was supposed to be funded by the tenants' rent, but many of the residents were low income, and when vacancy rates began to rise, there wasn't enough money to keep up with repairs. The skip-stop elevators, designed to reduce congestion, instead became crime hotspots. Stairwells were often dark and isolated, making them dangerous for residents. The communal galleries, intended as social spaces, were soon taken over by gangs, and vandalism became rampant as the buildings started to feel more like traps than homes.
Hey, mama.
Some of the buildings were so...
My password? No. Oh, dang. I was gonna ask him if you want to do this video, do this interview with me about the Pruitt-Igoes. I'm doing this video right now, and they're talking about the Pruitt-Igoes. I want to see if he'll do an interview with me about it. I'll ask him tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Poorly maintained that in the winter of 1970, a burst sewer pipe flooded the hallways with raw sewage, which froze to people's beds and clothes, slowly thawing out and leaving their belongings destroyed. Teenagers formed gangs for protection, and violence became a way of life. For many residents, walking into their apartment felt like running a gauntlet of danger. The utopian dream that was Pruitt-Igoe had turned into a nightmare of crumbling infrastructure, rampant crime, and hopelessness.
The Pruitt-Igoe experiment would come to an end during the 1970s, when these projects were finally closed and demolished, but for street gangs of St. Louis, this was just the beginning.
In 1972, demolition began on the 33-building Pruitt-Igoe housing project, built in the 1950s as the vision of the future of urban America. It turned out to be a symbol of all that had gone wrong with America's older cities, and this image would be played over and over again on national television and cited by the commentators and academics.
The 60s and particularly the 70s were some of the most violent times in St. Louis, but the streets were mostly controlled by the mafia and some smaller-scale dope pushers, such as the infamous drug kingpin Terry Joe Cooley, who would eventually meet his end in 1970 after he was killed in his home in a brutal quadruple murder that would also claim the lives of his associate, his girlfriend, and her 10-year-old son, with the newspapers at the time questioning if he had been killed due to his growing ambitions to take over the city's drug game. Also during this period, St. Louis would also begin to experience significant economic decline, combined with white flight, as the largely white middle class moved to the suburbs, leaving the predominantly black working classes with crumbling infrastructure and underfunded schools. These issues would hit East St. Louis on the Illinois side of the border first.
East St. Louis was experiencing in 1970 the kind of pain that a lot of other places were experiencing in the 1930s during the Great Depression.
We don't care about
there
them,
were
bro.
traumatic
These gang vice lords, Scorpions, they would hit image far beyond California. At the beginning of the night, the went away from Chicago to administer discipline and train the local members. But in 1988, things would begin to escalate quickly, as a little-known movie called Colors would...
This movie changed everybody in St. Louis' lives. Like, even our generation, gang. Like Colors watching Colors as a kid, bro, in St. Louis. First off, you already growing up around it, right? Right. So you hear people saying like this, that, or this, that. You know what I'm saying? Whatever they claim, whatever they say, and then like you see on the movie, they saying the same thing. So like now you wonder like, is this what they doing? You know what I'm saying? Now you want to, now you curious. Now you want to see what's it about. You know what I'm saying? It just changed everybody's life. Now you want to start claiming it. Now you want to start talking like them. Now you want to start. This movie
would hit movie
changed
theaters
our life
all over America, showing the life of LA gang members and bringing with it the vivid imagery, style, and mythology of the Bloods and Crips gangs, which would soon take roots in cities far beyond California. At the beginning of the 90s, St. Louis newspapers would begin reporting how so-called wannabe gangbangers emulating the Los Angeles gangs had begun harassing students in some schools for wearing certain colors. But the police would downplay the growing gang problem in the community. Perhaps this was simply not to spread panic, but the reality of the streets couldn't be downplayed. One particularly deadly rivalry would be between two North St. Louis gangs known as the Boys of Destruction, or BOD, and their rivals being known as the Horseshoe Posse. This rivalry would much later in 2009 be covered in the 4th season of the popular TV series Gangland in an episode titled Boys of Destruction. The BOD gang was allegedly founded by a member named Dorsey Brandon, and the members of the gang identified as Crips, their turf being on the south side of the Martin Luther King Drive, while the Horseshoe Posse, led by a young man named Hitman T, identified as Bloods and stayed on the north side of King Drive. This rivalry would escalate in 1991 when first in March, Hitman T, real name Tyrone McClinton, was shot to death in front of a gas station when he was only 17 years old. This was decades before gang members had Instagram Live to broadcast their disses and tell the city that they were smoking the latest dead op. But the streets never change, and gang members in early St. Louis would find analog methods to diss their murdered rivals. Following Hitman's death, BOD would allegedly taunt the Horseshoe Posse by spraying Dead Man T into a wall near the scene of the incident. During Hitman's funeral a week later, BOD members would allegedly shout insults to the members of the Horseshoe Posse, almost starting a mass brawl that was barely stopped by the police on the scene. But then, some months later in October, the BOD leader, Dorsey, would be shot and killed during a violent night when 4 people were killed in less than 24 hours, marking just how deadly these gangs had become. The following year, in 1992, the news would report how the gang problem had gotten out of control. Now the police were also seemingly coming clean and admitting that many of the gang members that they were arresting had in fact real connections to the Blood and Crip gangs in Los Angeles, and that their infiltration to St. Louis had started already in the late 80s, incentivized by higher profits from interstate drug sales. The police would also reveal that the gang culture went far beyond the black community. There were also gangs with white members and even some fully white gangs, like one known by the menacing name Hitman Posse. The article would also highlight how violent the gangs had become, which was reflected in the number of homicides that would peak in the following year, 1993, with the article highlighting one gang rivalry that had led to 8 youths' deaths in less than a year. This rivalry reportedly being between the 6 Deuce East Coast Crips and the 44 Blue Bud Crips from North St. Louis near Fairground Park. By 1996, the St. Louis gang problem had spread outwards from the inner city to the suburbs in the county, with the news mentioning that the Rollin' 60s Crips had become one of the most dominant factions both in the city and in the county. Ultimately, emerging from the Rollin' 60 Crips was St. Louis's most popular rapper, Nelly, who while didn't rep his gang in his songs, would make coded references to his gang's colors and be spotted wearing all blue on regular occasions. By the 2000s, various Chicago and LA originating gangs had become a normalized part of daily life in the streets of St. Louis. A new generation had now taken the reins, while some from the older generation were trying to right their wrongs, mentoring younger members and helping them escape the cycle of violence. But this normalization came at a cost. Unlike in the 1990s, when media attention was intense, the issue began to fade from public focus, as coverage was mainly reduced to surface-level reports about scattered anti-gang initiatives, while the city would build a new state-of-the-art facility to hold the growing number of inmates known as the St. Louis City Justice Center, or simply Justo. But the spread of gangs continued across the city, unfolding largely in the shadows, until of course the city's homicide rates began to get completely out of control, forcing reporters to look for reasons. While the officials would seemingly settle for half-baked solutions, or some pointing fingers at each other, with certain people claiming that judges were actually at fault for proving who did a homicide too high in St. Louis. But as the homicide rate kept rising to its highest levels, the rules of the game would completely change, with the rise of drill music from Chicago, gangs from Los Angeles, and social media apps from Silicon Valley. Gang members began to use music and Instagram accounts to broadcast their illegal street activities. And on social media, St. Louis ultimately became one of the most feared destinations. Nowadays, countless hood vlogs are up on YouTube, with vloggers risking their lives to go and visit the most dangerous city in modern America, racking up millions of views in the process.
Nearly every year for over a decade, St. Louis, Missouri has had the highest murder rate out of all major cities in the entire U.S., leading to its reputation as the murder capital of America. In 2021 alone, it nearly tripled Chicago's murder rate with over 87 murders per 100,000 people. With such a menacing reputation and little coverage of the hoods there past dark, I wanted to experience this city for myself. So in today's video, I travel out to the trenches of St. Louis, visit a rapper who just beat a murder charge, narrowly dodge the police, and spend a night in the murder capital of America.
What had once been a hidden criminal underworld had now become a social media reality TV show with gang warfare all out in the open. So to better understand the gang landscape in St. Louis today, let's take a closer look at the modern generation of gangs and rappers in the drill music era who are broadcasting their gang wars for the whole world to hear.
We're gonna stop it right there, man. 2004, we're gonna stop it right there. We will be doing a part 2 on this. We will be doing this whole little video. I'm just not gonna do all of it in one. But I'm calling out the goofies in this video, dog. I'm calling out the goofies and I'm calling out the clowns. If I see somebody and I notice, I'm gonna call it out, gang. If I hear some BS, I'm gonna call it out, gang. Like, so far, like I said, he did his homework. I can't deny that he did his homework. But like I said, that's it for this video. But like, share, subscribe, comment, ring that bell. Let me know what y'all think down in the comment section, and I'll catch you on the next one. We gone. You dig?